Hi guys, Jeremy here with Great Escapes, here to talk about our Clipper 21BH. So, now that you've had a good look around the camper, we're going to go through everything and talk about everything specifically. And remember to like, subscribe, comment, and share this video to help everyone else with their camping experience. So, first up, we have our pass-through storage bin. That way you can fit all your camping needs to take with you. And as we go around, we're going to have 4 stabilizer jacks, one on each corner of the unit. These are to help support the weight as you're moving around so it doesn't shift you around as bad. These are going to be manual crank downs, so using our handy dandy little tool, we'll set it right on there and crank clockwise to crank them down. After they make contact with the ground, you want to go ahead and give them 3 more full turns, 2 and 3. That way you know it's up off the ground and being supported. Next up, we have a solar input. That way, in case you were out dry camping and you brought your own solar panel with you, you can plug it right in and have it charging your battery up. Speaking of battery, we have our 12-volt battery located up here in the front, as well as our 2 20-pound propane tanks, which will be filled upon your pickup. The way this regulator works is whichever direction it's pointing towards is the tank in use. So if this first tank were to run empty on you, all you would have to do is swing this up to the front and around to the other tank. Go ahead and turn our knob counterclockwise to allow propane to come out, and you should be ready to go. Our power tongue jack is a very nice upgrade. It's as simple as it looks. Pressing the extend button causes it to come up. Pressing the retract button causes it to come down. Over here, we're going to have the other side of our pass-through storage bin. Looks exactly the same as it did on the other side. But next up, we're going to have our main water hookups. So we have our city water connection, which is where we're going to bring in our campsite water hose. Or if we're planning on doing dry camping, we're going to have to fill up our fresh water tank right here before, of course, we head out on our trip. And if you were dry camping, after you finish camping and using all the fresh water you needed, you would want to drain out your fresh water by removing this little white cap down here, and that would empty out your fresh water tank. As we move to the back, we're going to have our 30 amp cord, which conveniently pulls out. Of course, always make sure you pull out what you need. That way you're not at the pedestal trying to yank it out of the camper. But now as we walk over to our power pedestal, we'll lay our wire out. First, we're going to check to make sure that all of our breakers are off. And now with our 30 amp service, plug into our 30 amp slot and flip our 30 amp breaker on. And that should give us power to our unit. So as we come back over, if y'all had a satellite package or if the campground offered cable, you would bring the coax line into here, and once you're hooked up here, it's automatically ran to the inside for you. That way it's a simple, easy switch. Behind here, we're gonna have our components for our refrigerator, and there's really no need for you to dig in here on your own. Back here, we do have an escape door for our bunk area. So now we're going to talk about dumping our waste. Down here, we're gonna have our waste dumping station. You would simply remove the cap, take your hose, attach it on, run it over to where it's supposed to be dumped, attach on your 90-degree adapter over there, and we'll include a small clip-it, that way you can actually see what's going on. But a normal dumping procedure, after you have your hose hooked up, you're gonna wanna pull your black tank handle first, and then once it's done draining out, use your gray water tank to kind of clean out your hose, that way it's not as nasty as it normally is. After you're done, make sure you close both of these valves back off and put your cap back on. Then you can take your septic hose, pull the back cap off of your bumper, and slide it on in there. And this bumper will hold up to 20 feet of septic hose. Of course, you're gonna have a full-size spare tire here on the rear because it's really hard to drive a trailer on a donut. And the nice thing is we have an outdoor shower. That way, in case you have any kids or small animals you're bringing with you, you can always rinse them down before they bring their muddy shoes back in the house. And the nice thing is, it has a little handle here. That way, in case you were trying to wash your own hands, you're not playing the juggling game with the faucet. But make sure whenever you're done, coil it back up in there. There we are. Close the door and lock it back up. So, next thing we're going to talk about is our awning. So right now our awning is at full extension, and you can always tell because we'll have this black bar going across as well as this little tail flap sticking out. But if it was starting to slightly rain, of course don't leave your awning out in a storm, but as rain starts to collect up top, you can come to either one of these two sides, take 2 fingers, give it a little bit of a pull down, and that pitches your awning. That way all your water can drain off to one corner. And by the way, it is perfectly safe to go ahead and roll the awning back in with the arms in this bent position. Just make sure if you're gonna straighten it back out that you don't come up above straight, because this will break the awning and damage it. So if anything, leave it bent down a hair and you'll be safe to go. Over here, we have our water heater cover. This unit has already been de-winterized for you, so there's really nothing you need to do in here. We'll have our furnace out port. That way, in case you're running the heat, you know to keep the kids away from it. Up top, we're gonna have our vent hood for above our stove top. That way, in case you're cooking the bacon and it's starting to get smoky on the inside, you can take 2 fingers, pop the flap open, cut the vent hood on the inside, and it would vent all that smoke to the outside. But of course, before you go to travel, take 2 fingers and push down on the flap until you hear that pop noise. That way you know it's sealed off and no bugs or insects can get onto the inside. Last thing, we have a 110 power outlet. That way, in case you're putting an outdoor speaker or a TV out here, you always have power to the outside. But all right, let's head to the inside. All right guys, now as soon as we walk in the door, to our left-hand side, we're gonna have our main control board. So on here, we're gonna have the controls for our awning, extend and retract. So right now, we're gonna go ahead and extend it out. All right. Next up, we have our switches for our water heater and our water pump. The water pump is how we get the water out of our freshwater tank to our faucets, such as our sinks and our showers. Our water heater on this unit is going to be propane only, so of course make sure your tanks are on the front, and then flipping this switch, it has a direct spark ignition, so you don't have to get out there and light it by hand. Next up, we have our main light switch for the unit. And lastly, we'll have our tank checks. So first button on here is our battery. So if we press battery, we can see that our battery level is fully charged. Freshwater tank still has some water in it. That way, in case we're taking it off dry camping. And then our black and our grays are both going to be empty at this time. But as they fill up, you'll notice the LED indicators. So at the 1/3 full mark, you'll see 2 of these lights on, and so on and so forth. And of course, wait until your black tank is at the 2/3 full mark before you dump. Alright. Up next, we have our thermostat for our furnace. So the switch on top here is the on and off. So by pushing it to the left, it cuts our furnace on. And at the bottom, we have our heat adjustment. That way you can set it to the right temperature so you don't accidentally overcook yourself at night. I hope you know how to use a sink. But next up, we're gonna have our GFCI. This is an important thing to note. That way, in case you have the coffee pot going and you also have your wife in there with the hair dryer and now none of the outlets in here are working, you can always check here first. Seeing the red light on means the GFCI is tripped, and all you have to do is press the black button here in the center to reset it. Next up, we have our stovetop. This one is going to be a little old school. You're still going to need a lighter. I normally suggest carrying one of the long, thick lighters with you, but turn the knob to light. And whenever you first cut on your propane tanks, there is a little bit of air in the lines, so it could take a few moments to get the propane to where it needs to be. There we go. Once it's lit, hold the knob in for another 10 seconds. That way the thermocoupler can heat up. Afterwards, you're good to let go. Right now, it is on high. And this burner is your high output burner. So cook the bacon up front, cook the eggs in the back, but it still turns down low enough. Whoopsie, a little too low. It still turns down low enough, that way you can simmer a pot of chili. Next up, we have our microwave. Functions just the same as your one at home, just maybe a little bit smaller. Behind this door, we're gonna have our bathroom. This is a standard camper style toilet. So of course, pushing down partially on the pedal would allow water to start flowing in, and then pushing down all the way is how you flush. In here, we're also gonna have a vent hood. This is a manual crank, so turning the knob counterclockwise raises the hood up. And then this little switch in the corner cuts the fan on. But once you're done, make sure you close this back up. That way, in case you get a freak rainstorm, it doesn't flood out the camper. Alright, our next appliance is going to be our refrigerator. This fridge runs off of 110 power or off of propane. So right now it's in the automatic setting, meaning that it's going to try to automatically detect electricity first. But if you unplug the power cord outside, it will automatically switch over to propane. That way any groceries left in here will stay nice and cold while you go down the road. But if you have no groceries in it and you're leaving the campsite, you can go ahead and cut it off. That way you don't waste any of your propane going down the road. We have our RV radio. So if we go ahead and cut it on, we'll have Zone A, which is going to be our indoor speakers, and Zone B, which is our outdoor speakers. Of course, you can have them both on at the same time. That way you can entertain everybody inside and outside. But if it's nighttime, make sure you go ahead and cut that Zone B off. That way the campsite isn't being affected by your loud music. Our main TV is going to be located here in the bedroom. And up top here, we have our TV outputs as well as our satellite outputs. So if you were to hook cable up or satellite up to the outside, this is where it would be distributed out. And one quick note, this unit does have an antenna built onto it, and with this red light on, we know that the antenna is getting power. If we hooked up cable to the outside, leaving it in the same connector, all we would have to do is cut the power off to this, and that would allow the cable feed to come into the TV now. But of course, if you're trying to pick up local channels, make sure you cut this back on. Our last two safety features built into every camper, we're going to have a smoke detector, just like the ones you have at home, And of course, we're always going to have a fire extinguisher located right beside the door.
Packing up the family, headed on down the road, on a new adventure, wherever we go, thanks to great escapes of the